this way. Okay. In thinking about what I thought was most important for you guys to walk away with, I wanted you to, in general, understand what the potential benefits of aural rehab are for you personally. I wanted to apply that to what we've created at Amptify. And then I wanted you to think about whether it was a good fit for you or maybe people that you know through your organization or your community, just so that you understand who's a candidate for Amptify. And I think I just want to begin by mentioning our mission, which really is to enable people with hearing loss to live their best and most confident lives. Because we know that when you have a hearing challenge, it's not really just about the hearing, right? It's about the loss of understanding, speech discrimination. I hear you, but I can't understand you. It's about safety. It's about where sounds are coming from in your environment. It's about exhaustion because you're working so hard to understand what people are saying. You get tired more quickly and you put more effort in than the average person, and that cognitively has other ramifications. It's about your relationships and what happens when conversations are not as natural as they used to be, or there's miscommunication because you're misunderstanding. And so what we've tried to do is take what we know about this and also about the isolation that comes with having a hearing loss, and wrap up lessons into our program that address all of this. So if we take hearing healthcare and we sort of divide it into 3 pillars, I think you're very familiar with the first 2, which is, I think I have a hearing loss, let me go get a hearing test, and any sort of evaluation, other evaluation that I might need. And then you certainly, everyone here knows about 2, which is, this is my hearing loss, these are my problems. Here is the technology solution that fits your problem. And that might include some informational counseling by your audiologist. And if you've got a really great audiologist, she'll take a few minutes, at the hearing aid fitting or follow-up to, talk about how you might be able to use the hearing aids in your specific situations and maybe give you some tips and tricks about clear communication. And she might also recommend an assistive device, maybe like a remote microphone or another accessory that goes with your hearing aids, something for the TV maybe. That's treatment. When I talk about rehab, I am really talking about what we describe as person-centered care. It's taking that treatment solution and then really diving into how we are going to optimize communication using that technology. And so Amptify has created a program that has 4 components to it. And really our goal is to sort of give you the tools that you need and then encourage you to use those tools in your everyday life while practicing your speech discrimination through our auditory training games. When you sign up for Amptify, you join a group of people who are going through the program at the same time as you. And your group members receive a daily lesson. So the group members and you receive a daily lesson. They join a community so that the group members can share with each other. They have a single coach that sort of follows the whole group together. And then there is a games menu that works on specific auditory cognitive skills. And so we're just going to break each one of these components down so that you understand what's in the program. and then we'll sort of like apply it to different types of profiles. Okay, so what we have here are screenshots of some of our lessons. And if you look at the second one, you'll see where it says Thursday, you'll see that there are a series of tabs, and it looks like in this screenshot, we're on the third tab, and we've read the first two tabs. Basically, what we're doing is every day we're giving you bite-sized chunks organized by topic into weekly modules. So for instance, the second week is all about your hearing diagnosis. And if you don't really understand the audiogram or how the word recognition score really contributes to your overall vibe of handicap, we talk about high frequencies and how that contributes to your speech understanding. And that's really for the generic curriculum. Week 4, our fourth module, talks all about communication breakdowns and provides real-life communication strategies. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But basically, you're loading an app onto your phone, or you can, on your desktop, you can pull it up. I have the website at the end of the presentation. You're registering, signing up, and you're receiving these daily lessons that you read. And then at the bottom of the lesson, the last slide in the lesson launches you into the game recommendation of the day. And you'll see that in the last slide. This is the game recommendation for Treasure Island, which is a speech and noise game based on a slot machine. And it's got, well, I won't tell you about the special trick in that Treasure Island in case you decide to join. I'll let you figure it out yourself. But for those who like to gamble, there are some tricks to, you know, accumulate extra coins and that sort of thing. This is a nice slide because what it does is list by topic what's in the curriculum. We have an introductory week that provides some general strategies about active listening and reading nonverbal communication. I've talked about the second. The third one, I think, is one of our best because it helps you break down strategies that you can put into place ahead of a communication situation, mainly related to your environment, how to set yourself up, how to pick the best seat, how to remove yourself from an environment that just isn't conducive to hearing, the language to use when you're speaking with people about it. Communication breakdowns, again, once you're in a situation and you're stuck, how do you get out of it? We talk about the feelings associated with being in that type of situation. 5 is a plan for reading lips. We have nifty videos that you can test your lip reading skills. I bet you everybody who's logged on here is a pretty good lip reader. We also discuss, thank goodness, in the past tense for the most part, the impact of masking and how that so impacted people with hearing loss because they can't lip read with masks. We have a whole week on the link between your auditory and your cognitive skills and why people with hearing loss sometimes feel, for example, that they can't remember conversations as easily as people who maybe don't have hearing loss. And, you know, we talk about the bucket of cognitive resources. And when you have a hearing loss and you're working so hard to understand through the hearing loss, you use up more of those resources. So there's less left for memory and comprehension and speed. And what's lovely is that the author of the curriculum really does a great job of taking complex neuroscience theories and putting it into layperson's language so that you can connect it to your daily life, your real lives. Calm the mind, enhance performance. I know that you all know that when you're really stressed out and afraid you're not going to understand or anxious about something separate from your hearing loss, it's always more challenging to focus and understand. So we have a week about that. ensure successful conversations is really about managing the relationships in your life through the hearing loss and learning how to be assertive in your requests without being too aggressive. We acknowledge that some people will bluff, will choose a more passive approach, will not go to the meeting rather than have to manage the hearing in the meeting. We really are in touch without judgment, the different ways that people learn to cope with hearing loss. And we hope that through this module, we encourage, getting back into things and learning the language and the strategies to stand up for yourself in a positive way. Explore technology. We talk about assistive technology. So we spend time on telecoiling loops and Bluetooth accessories, remote microphones, all the stuff that might seem really complicated, or maybe you never seem to have enough time to ask all the questions to for your, at your audiology appointment. It's there. And even better, you have a coach who knows about assistive technology. So if you ever had a question, you could ask her. The final three are sort of like advanced topics. We talk about nutrition in general to maintain an anti-inflammatory, heart healthy, which is blood vessel healthy diet. We touch on those medical concerns most adjacent to hearing loss. So that would include, ototoxicity, diabetes, noise exposure, cerumen impaction for people, with hearing aids. It feels like the wax just keeps growing and growing more quickly. So we talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then that final week is a nice review to sort of like prompt your memory of what happened at the beginning. This is 12 weeks. So these are 12 modules, one module per week. It's a 3-month program. Questions, because that's a lot of information. Any questions? No? Okay. Oh. Hello? Let's try again. Okay. So your personalized hearing health coach, at present, all of the coaches are audiologists. They're really not performing audiology duties. They're really acting as your partner through the program. They're there to answer questions about the curriculum, to maybe help you apply some of the theory that you're learning to your everyday life. They answer questions, and importantly, they keep you accountable. Because what we know about traditional auditory training is that the adherence rate is miserable. I think it's like 20% of people who say they're going to do auditory training actually do auditory training, though cochlear implant recipients have better scores there. So our goal is to really stay engaged, develop a relationship, and then, keep everybody on target. And when I say everybody on target, what we are shooting for is for you to read 6 lessons per week and for you to train 1 hour per week. So you're playing an hour's worth of games. And I don't know if this is a Netflix crowd, but really when you think about, binging a new TV show, an hour is nothing, right? So an hour a week of game playing, and then 6 lessons. And that is a couple of hours. It ends up being a couple of hours of commitment per week. The peer support community, Susan, my ears perked up when you introduced yourself, because I thought that you might be interested in this part of it. It's nice because you have a group of maybe like 10, 15, 20 people who are going through together. And a couple weeks into the curriculum, we open the wall, like the community wall. And the coaches will post prompts intended to sort of encourage group conversation and sharing, usually tied to that week's module, that topic. But then you're also able to, as a group member, to create your own posts, to comment, etc. And I think what's really nice, we've been in the CI community, especially, the CI community really supports each other and answers questions. I will often put people who are maybe considering cochlear implants into the CI group, even though they don't have it yet, just so that they can absorb all of the information and knowledge of other people. So the peer support community is great. And then the final component, which really is the foundation of the whole program and has its origin in research, are auditory brain training games. These are screenshots of actual games. There's a little something for everybody. So if you are not a video game person and you barely, open your phone to play any sort of game, we have very simple auditory training games that you listen for a word through background noise, and you just have to tap on yes or no. Did you hear this word or did you not hear this word? And then if you are a gamer and you want to, a little bit more challenge, we have a couple of games that are more about hand-eye coordination, and you receive, more points the better you do from that perspective. But there really is something for everybody. And because of our demographic, we have an older set of people who are joining Amptify. We really are trained from a support perspective to walk you through understanding the games. There really are no stupid questions from people who are confused about how to use Amptify, because we, our customer support team really has a lot of patience. This is a little bit foggy now that I'm looking at it, because I took a screenshot and tried to make it big. But if you look along the top, what I've done is I've broken down the 13 games that we have, and then the auditory skills that it trains along the top. So we talk about auditory memory and auditory sequencing. That's really kind of subsets of the same skill. Can you remember chunks of material that you hear, sometimes in quiet, sometimes in noise? Can you put those chunks in order? Because that's important when through conversation, right? You have to be able to remember what somebody said to get the punchline at the end of the joke. And sometimes it's important to remember the sequence of things that you hear. So we practice that. Discourse comprehension is more of like, we have one game called Shakespeare that is sentence-based, and it's intended to have you listen to what would be the equivalent of like a whole paragraph, and remember the order also of what you're hearing. Speech perception is essentially in every game because you're having to understand words no matter the game that you're in. Phoneme discrimination, similar to that. We do have a couple of games that are focused on morpheme identification, which is the word endings in words. So you know how sometimes you'll miss the plural S, or you're not sure if it's like past tense ED or not. We have a couple of games that focus just on that skill. And then, of course, noise tolerance. We have a few games that are adaptive, meaning the better you do in background noise, the more challenging the noise gets, and it automatically adjusts so that you are challenging yourself without being too frustrated. And then we have a few other games, which I like for people who have more severe hearing losses, where there's a manual noise slider on the game. So you could, for instance, play Ear Knot, which by default is an auditory memory game. You're having to remember the words that you heard in the planets and you could choose 3 planets to remember or 6 planets to remember. But ear nod is great because it also has a noise slider. So it's like you're killing 3 birds with 1 stone. You're doing speech perception, auditory memory, and speech and noise training at once. And then processing speed. We have a couple of games where, you know, you're flying the airplane into the cloud and you can choose a fastest or a faster flying machine. And processing speed is important for speech understanding or for communication, because there's a bunch of rapid talkers out in the world. Now, you guys are on the West Coast, but let me tell you, in New Jersey, we talk fast. I am intentionally slowing down, and I still might be talking too fast for you. So rapid speech is like, you know, an everyday problem or barrier for people with hearing loss. And so we're working on auditory processing speed intentionally. It's a lot of information again, but I kind of wanted you to know the depth of what seems like, you know, simple games. Our animation, we're a young company. We use the animation packages that we could afford, but we want you to know that in that kitty looking animation is a lot of thought, and there's research to support even the way that we present the information. But we do have research that shows improved speech and noise ability with 12 to 16 hours of training. And that's why we ask members who join to do an hour per week, because then by the time you get to the end of the curriculum, you've achieved that 12 hours. And we know from research that that's enough for the games to be effective. Okay, so just a couple of minutes about the cochlear implant track. We started with a generic curriculum, and we realized pretty quickly that CI recipients have specific needs. And so we took our generic curriculum and we adapted it. We really look at, for example, week 2, talking about you know, your hearing diagnosis. We really approach it from the perspective of, unless you've had sudden hearing loss, if you're a CI recipient, you've had a lot of time to know about your audiogram, and you know what words or what part of the range of speech is most challenging for you. We tailor our assistive technology talk to the 3 companies. Currently, we have worked with Medel in Canada. So in Canada, the cochlear implant companies are allowed to provide this program at no charge, but for some reason there's regulation related to the United States. So for Medel recipients in the United States, there is a coupon code for you. In advanced bionics, we love Sonova, and we have worked actively with advanced bionics on research projects in the UK. Not so much in the United States, though we do have people sign up privately with advanced bionics hearing aids. I'm sorry, cochlear implants. And we are happy to report that we have recently begun conversations with Cochlear Corporation, because I think in the United States, Cochlear is probably the most popular CI company, and they have developed their own rehab tools historically. But we are in conversations now, and we're going to be trialing Amptify at a couple of their clinics. So we're very excited about that. As a result of our exposure to all of the companies, I think you'll find, well, I am the coach for the CI track. Personally, I am the coach. And although I was never a CI audiologist in the clinic, I really feel like I have learned a lot about each of the companies. And if I don't know the answer specifically to a question, I know where to find it. So it's great. I think the takeaway piece or the nugget is that final bullet there, because last year, it's really almost, it's going into the second year now, we decided to do an experiment. And typically, like if you sign up and you're a private pay, you have to continue to subscribe in order to continue access after the 3 months. There's, well, different tracks of subscription models. But for CI recipients, what we've done is we've created an alumni group. And it doesn't matter if you're private pay or if you purchased your subscription through a clinic, you get access to this alumni group. So as a result, we have about 140 people in this alumni group, and they're lovely. They were the most active of our recipients to begin with, but they really appreciate the community aspect. And I know that I can't wait when I have a graduating CI group for them to join the alumni group. Questions? Okay. This speaks to the research that is associated with our games. And we have studies to support enhanced speech discrimination, the perceptual effort. So reduced perceptual effort, meaning it's easier to listen after going through our training. Listening confidence, I see that that's probably the most common report when I ask people at the end of the program. They just feel more confident going out into those situations that they used to feel anxious about. And we did do, there's no new hearing aid users here, but we did do a study with new hearing aid users. 96% of them rated us as, being a positive experience, and about half of them said that the Amptify experience had a direct influence on the ease with which they adapted to new hearing aids. So we were pretty excited about that. And finally, we have at the end of the curriculum, we ask for feedback about what they've experienced through the program. And I have like a 10-page document of positive reinforcement. And I decided to include a couple of slides of, the positive feedback that we've gotten. I'm really proud of the impact that people say that Amptify has had on their everyday lives. So it's not like they're just reading a communication tip of the day. They are reading about the tip, and because the lessons are interactive, meaning you are prompted to answer in the lesson to apply that tidbit to your life. I think that there's like a stronger bridge between what you're learning and then what you put into practice. So it's always fun, to hear at the end, or maybe, like week 9 it's a group member's daughter's wedding. And, she messages me the week before and she's like, okay, I'm really worried about the cocktail hour. It's got high ceilings, and, we talk through it. And then, it's really rewarding to hear afterwards that she was able to enjoy her daughter's wedding with less stress related to her hearing loss. So I included a testimonial from a CI recipient. I think because by nature, if you're a pretty good candidate or better, and you are activated, and then you do the rehab you're supposed to do during that first, 6 months or 12 months, I think CI recipients, I heard I think there was a man who, is it Neil, is bilaterally, right? And you said something about being so happy to have your hearing again. And so I think that by the end of the 12 weeks, I think CI recipients in particular who are adherent to their rehab are so excited to have the hearing that they've had that, we get nice feedback. Okay. And so we have come to the end of the explanation about Amptify. From a candidacy standpoint, I've spoken about new hearing aid users. I've spoken about CI recipients in particular. But I want you to keep in mind that for existing hearing aid users, Amptify is totally appropriate. So even if you've had your hearing aids for 5 years and maybe you went to the audiologist and there was a little bit of a dip in your word recognition, you're concerned because you're struggling maybe a little bit more in a certain situation that you never struggled in before. Even really experienced hard of hearing people come to Amptify and they'll say, you know, I kind of know this stuff, like in the lessons, but they appreciate it being organized by topic. And then, so it's like an intensive on setting your environment up. And it kind of helps people like pull the tidbits they've been using for years in their life and kind of put it together. And one of the nice features that we have is our bookmarking system. So, you know, you can save special slides that really capture something that's pertinent to your life, and you can bookmark it and then save it in a section just for you. And that's nice to review after the fact, because it's like you've created your own little cheat sheet of the most important stuff. So for HLAA members, we've created a join code. It's 15% off. If you're joining Amptify as a private pay person, I think before I talked about 2 different subscription tracks, right? If you're in the track, which I think most of you would be, of being just a person who finds Amptify through an organization, etc., you would sign up and you would be subscribing to Amptify and paying Amptify for the subscription, right? So it's just a private pay subscription to Amptify. Typically, that is $49.95 per month. And you figure you go 3 months, maybe 4 months, because you might have run behind on your training. Some people subscribe even longer, or they'll like take a break and then come back 6 months later, but about $50 per month. So it's $150 for the program. And if you use this join code when you register, you'll get 15% off of that automatically. The other way to subscribe would be if your clinic, your audiology clinic, subscribed to Amptify. So if they had a professional account through Amptify and you purchased the subscription through the clinic, then there are a couple of perks to that, but that would be dependent on your audiology practice subscribing. And I think we have a few California locations. I don't have that. I'm sorry, I don't have that like off the top of my head though, but I could certainly email Janie with those names. And even if you're, you know, even if they're in Southern California, I'm sure they wouldn't mind, you know, having you buy the subscription from them so that you could get those perks. I think it ends up being that most clinics sell it for like $150 or $200, but you are able to continue training, playing those games indefinitely. So you are paying upfront for the cost of the program, but instead of having to continue to subscribe monthly to retain access to the games after the curriculum is finished, if you purchase a subscription through a clinic, you just get unlimited access to the games, you know, going forward. So if you're intending to incorporate it into your daily life for a long period of time, it is worthwhile to find a clinic that subscribes to Amptify and purchase it through the clinic. So I have given you a lot of information, and I've talked for 35, 40 minutes now, I think. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you look on the chat, I think you'll find that
There's 5 of them. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's see.
And maybe stop sharing so we can.
Yes, we can stop sharing. It's good. Okay, great. So the first one says, one of the biggest challenges to me is acoustics. Yeah, so for sure. And I would say that we talk about we talk about acoustics and distance quite a bit in week 3 in the module about the environment. And, you know, what to look for, how to group yourself so that, I mean, sometimes it really does come down to if you're going to the Spanish restaurant with tile floors and high tin ceilings, you really shouldn't go at Saturday night at 7 p.m. Like you really do need to go on off-peak hours because there's not much you can do, or you can try, you know, there's a lot of talk about booths and acoustic tile, and there's talk about you know, lecture halls, specific strategies for lecture halls, but it's true, acoustics play a big role. Can hearing loss impact brain function and memory? So there are, let's see, like 2 topics probably related to that. The first is there was research that was released last summer that was 10 years in the making out of Johns Hopkins that definitively tied untreated hearing loss to a faster cognitive decline. And as anybody who's been practicing audiology for a good amount of time has known that people with untreated hearing loss are more likely. What they haven't done yet is created the research that proves that treated hearing loss will stop cognitive decline. We don't know that, but we do know that people who use hearing aids and cochlear implants and receive, you know, treatment slow are not as fast as those with untreated hearing loss. So there's cognitive benefit to using hearing aids, you know, and staying up on that. Now, I think what you might have been referring to is that cognitive resource analogy that I was suggesting earlier in the presentation. And it isn't that the hearing loss is causing memory loss, like neurological decline. It's that as we get older, that bowl of cognitive resources might just be a little bit naturally smaller than it was 30 years ago. So there's just so much in reserve. And if you have a hearing loss and you're using most of those resources on just understanding what the person is saying, well, then you feel like you've got short-term memory issues because there's not much left to take your short term and put it into long term. And you know, when we talk about that in week 6 a lot, and I mean, it's been many people who have messaged me private chat, you know, as a coach on the side with such relief during that week because they see themselves. I had an 88-year-old going through the program and she was like, oh my gosh, this is me. And thank you, you know, so much. And then we just talk about strategies to try and have yourself have more reserve. And that is by making hearing easier, by doing your training, and by using assistive technology. Although I've done auditory training both when I had hearing aids and when I received CIs, the difference of results was far greater with CI, for sure. And I think that's why CI recipients love Amptify, because by nature, they are retraining their brain with greater potential, right? Because they now have accessibility to sound that they didn't have before. And so for a person with severe hearing loss who comes to Amptify, their benefit is being amongst people who can, you know, similar to, I think, what Sally said, being amongst people and feeling a connection and not isolated. They they consolidate their strategies, and they practice their hearing and at least learn what are their problem sounds. But unless there's a way for there to be program adjustments in the hearing aid, some people with severe hearing loss just don't have access to F or TH. It's just too high frequency a sound and too quiet a sound. And it's almost like the process of learning that can sometimes be therapeutic. So yes, I totally agree. CI, you just see leaps and bounds of improvement, and it's exciting. I think you mentioned that MED-EL users have their own coupon code. Do I need to contact MED-EL to find out about that? Also, is Amptify musical pitch perception modules? Okay, so two things. You don't have to contact MED-EL. I think if you Google search MED-EL Hear Peers Amptify. So, Hear Peers is the, Hear Peers, right? Yeah, okay. So it's through Hear Peers that we're providing that coupon. And that's what I would suggest that you do. And that's actually helpful to me because I do, like I said, I wear many hats. We're a small company. So when I see somebody who registers through Hear Peers, I know automatically I need to put them with the CI people. So that would be nice. Okay, musical pitch perception modules. No, but I will tell you, we don't have, in which module do we talk about music perception? In one of the modules, we talk about music perception, and we basically commiserate with music lovers about how the hearing loss can change perception. We don't have any training specifically for it. However, I will share with you that outside of Amptify, there is a new program called Meludia, MELUDIA. Yes, because you're a MED-EL person, because you probably heard about that, Neil, from MED-EL. Meludia is also a paid program intended to train musical perception and for people with hearing loss. And I think a while back, MED-EL had a specific kind of coupon code. They got a certain number of weeks free, but you do not have to be a cochlear implant recipient to join Meludia. And I wholeheartedly suggest it to members who have hearing aids who ask about musical training. I don't have personal experience with it, but it pretty much is the only thing on the market that is recently updated. Some of the other CI companies, I think, are working on it or have things exclusively for their company. But Meludia is open to everybody. Let me see. I think is the subscription good for 3 months only, or can you spread out the time period? So technically, when you subscribe privately, you're entering your credit card information and you will be billed monthly until you cancel. And it's easy to cancel, and you can cancel at any time, and you can tell your coach, and your coach will cancel for you. But it is supposed to be all the way through until you cancel. However, if you say you're going away for 6 weeks, or you've got a surgery coming up and you're not going to be able to do it, or you can let your coach know, and she will manually go in and pause your subscription. And you can set a time. I please don't tell anybody that I told you that, because I think that is not intended for every person to do, but you could do that if you needed to. And we have, we're pretty flexible about pausing subscriptions for longer than 2 weeks. Like if you're going to be doing something for a month, if you have a sudden emergency, just let us know. An excellent article in HLA's latest monthly magazine about music memory and its relation to people. Yes, this is a hot topic in audiology. I had about 20% improvement with rehab with hearing aids after about 2 months. Only 100% improvement, over 100% improvement during the same time with CI. So who is that? That's Neil. Neil, can you tell me a little bit about the music training that you did?
Yeah, I was talking about the my verbal training, the music training that I've been doing. Am I a little louder now? I think I turned my volume to max.
Yeah, you're better.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, I started working with this group that's out in California. We're I guess,
Most of us. Most of us.
Southern California.
Mhm.
And they meet every Thursday, and they have different musicians come, and they have people, audiologists, and they have, it's a great group because there's a lot of work being done, not just there, but in several states around the country and different places around the world on how people with hearing loss, and in this group, it's especially people with cochlear implants, how they work on regaining a certain degree of music appreciation.
Right.
And it's not easy because these things were designed as speech processors, really. And Ray, who's sort of like the heads this thing up, he's been doing a lot of work with things like speed of how quickly things are processed and whatnot. And many people around the country are working on this too. And a lot of that research gets fed back to the three companies that are constantly redesigning their implants. So I'm happy to be part of that group because they're a bunch of great people. There's a lot of younger people, which with HLAA, sometimes I feel like I'm in the old age home. I turn 80 next month, but it's inspiring to me when I see also with my musical pitch perception that I went from being totally unable to tell, let's say, if you look at some of the free music apps like Angel Sound, and they have the different contours. Is it going up a scale? Is it going down the scale? Is it level? Is it going up then down? Is it down then up? Is it going up and then straight? And so on. So there's 9 different contours. And in the beginning, I could barely tell one from the other. And towards the end, it depends on the gap between the notes, of course. But towards the end, I was finding that my pitch perception was notably improved, and in some cases 100%, depending on the gap. And then there's this group out in Germany called Sight that has this very simple test. It was a lot of fun, and they would play Happy Birthday at a certain speed, and then they would record you singing back what you thought you heard. And it was good to me. I used to sing in choirs, and my pitch was perfect, not perfect pitch, but my pitch was right on. And but with sight, I had since lost quite a bit of my hearing and my pitch perception. But she showed me the graph where I had hit about half the notes, and the others were close. And she said, your hearing is about the same as the average person's, which is not very good if you're in a choir. But,
Right.
It was encouraging to me that that my pitch perception was improving. And music is among, for me, one of the most beautiful and important things still in my life. They always was. And I'm grateful for my cochlear implants. Not just for the reason that I can have conversations with people depending on the acoustics.
Yeah.
Here I could hear every word that you said, and without looking at what did she say there?
Yeah.
But again, that's acoustical too, because I have a towel on my desk and I'm near a wall in the corner. So hopefully my acoustics going out are audible to most people, and I find there's a great variety, a very great variation in how people sound, and of course location. I was at the doctor's this morning, and the cardiology unit, for some reason, the echo lab.
Oh yeah.
The whole hallway is just soaking sound. So I could, the nurse in front of me was talking and facing the other way and wearing a mask, and I could understand what she was saying because the acoustics in that particular hallway were great. Whereas if I were in another hallway, it would have been impossible.
Sure. And I think I think medical facilities in general are notoriously bad for hearing, because no matter how long a doctor has been working, it's rare to find the doctor who actively remembers you have a hearing loss and needs to change the way that he's talking to you, and then the masks and the whole bit.
I've
But
been very lucky with that. And, I think for one thing, they appreciate having shiny floors that they can clean the blood up off of, and,
yeah.
and the walls, and, it's just
True.
something goes shooting
But-
across the room. But, that particular lab was unbelievably easy to hear, and I appreciated that.
I think what I wanted to mention to the rest of the group about what Neil said was that, with CI, because you have, 20, 24 electrodes, whatever you've got around that,
I've just got 12.
you've just got 12. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's one thing to be able to learn to process that electrical stimulation for speech, but music, has such a wide variety. That's why music appreciation really is the last. And I've had quite a few discouraged people, and somewhere along the 9 to 15 month post activation, if they really keep at it. I had the most beautiful response from someone who was an excellent rehabber, and she went to the symphony and she really enjoyed it. She really enjoyed it, and she wrote a beautiful note to me about how she felt restored compared to the pre-implant.
I got my left one about a year before my right one. And I was a nut. I didn't know how long I was supposed to do rehab. So I was doing a half an hour rehab minimum every day.
That's great.
So then I went back after a couple of months and saw my audiologist, and she said, "You are my star student." And I believe, for me, once a week wouldn't have been enough, because as a teacher, I've learned, and I tell the students that I still tutor online. I tell them, you have to be doing things more than once a week, because the learning curve, it goes up like this, and after a couple of days, it levels off and even goes down. And then, if you're just doing this once a week, your progress is very gradual. So I encourage, whenever, I don't say you have to be a nut like me, but I encourage people to find that point that's comfortable for them, to practice it more often than once a week if they can.
For sure. And what I like to tell people is that our auditory training, because there's 13 games, you really can change it up a bit. But if you get sick of games, you can even, there are other resources online for auditory training that you can access. You can even just listen to an audiobook and follow along.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorites is poets.org/audio. I like poetry, and they have hundreds, I think maybe thousands of poets that are reading their own poems, or sometimes the poems of other poets, different voices, male, female, some with accents. And and the text is right there, so you can follow. If you're having trouble following what they're saying, you can follow it there. And that was a little change of pace for me that I really enjoyed, is being able to do that. I'm going to type the URL in there in case anybody else.
That's good. And you reminded me to mention that our auditory training games have multiple different voice options. So like, say you're just really struggling to understand your little grandkids, you can train with a child's voice. And we have research that suggests the closer the training stimuli is to your real life issue, the better the transfer is. So if you are like a PBS person who struggles through accented, British TV shows, you can come on, we have a British accent, and you can just train with our British accent. Okay.
I love British TV.
Yeah, right, exactly. And, so you can get individualized practice. Do you have any other questions?
Just thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, you're welcome. And if you go to Amptify.com, that's AMPT as in Tom, IFY, Amptify.com. You can read a little bit about the company. You can read a little bit more about our research. And I think in the upper right-hand corner, it says Get Started. And if you click Get Started and then say that you are a person with hearing loss, you'll be prompted to that registration screen where you can enter that join code. And I don't know. Oh, good. Somebody put the join code in there. That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Neil. So I think that wraps it up.
Well, thank you
have
so
one.
much.
I have one
It was-
question.
It was
Oh, sure.
fascinating.
Thanks,
Um,
Sally. Yeah, Jeannie.
It was the alumni group.
Yes.
How long do people stay inside the alumni group?
Well, you know, because I have fun with the alumni group, it was supposed to be like a short-term experiment to see what happens when you put everybody together, but I've just kept it going. So I don't want to say that it's indefinite, that once you go through the program, it's going to be indefinitely there, but I can tell you that I don't have any plans, and they kind of listen to me regarding the CI stuff. So I have no plans of suggesting that we close down the alumni group. People just stay, and they come and they go. And sometimes, because you can get an email notification about somebody's question or whatever was posted, the prompt that was posted. So people might not talk for, I might not hear from somebody for 3 months, and then they have something to say about this topic and they jump in, and it's nice.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Michelle.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, anybody?
Sarah Oser.
Sarah also, yeah.
What is in the brain rehabilitation itself, if there's a word played, cat, hat, and I have to distinguish between the two,
Yes.
by my listening to cat over and over and over again, is that what is making my hearing better?
So yes and no. If you have no audibility in the range of, no matter how many times you hear cat, you are always going to hear it as at. You're not going to hear the key, the k part, right? And our training can't help you hear the C. But it can, maybe it's that because if you know about like the acoustic energy of individual phonemes, it's not like it's a single spot on the audiogram that makes C. There's formants that overlap each other. And so maybe it is that you learn that it doesn't sound like k, but it sounds like something shy of k that you never really knew was, but now you begin to understand and recognize that altered version of the word is actually cat. So I don't want to provide like unrealistic expectations about restoring audibility of sounds that you don't have access to. But if you do have access to it and it just sounds a little weird, practicing it over and over again is going to have you better recognize it.
Okay.
Now, the speech in noise is that is improvement. And I think it was 3 or 4 of the studies documented improvement. And that's, a little bit different because it's not just about audibility. It's about your brain's ability to focus in on the thing it wants to, separate from the background noise. And now with that, we do have research that supports improved ability to selectively attend to an item through our training. That was a long-winded explanation, sorry.
Well, so it's the focusing
Yeah, so it's
that gets
focusing.
better.
Yes, it's the speed, and it also is the recognition of individual words as you hear it. But the worse your hearing loss gets, the greater the chances that there are certain parts of speech that you don't hear at all. And that's where there's limited benefit.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. But if that's the case, if you have dead regions of hearing, then you might be a cochlear implant candidate, which ties me back to the beginning, who somebody said that they had gone to, I think it was Sally who said that nobody ever recommended a CI, and then you eventually, right, okay. And I think that is, I'm going to take responsibility as a profession for that. And I think that I probably was, I was guilty of it too 20 years ago, because at that point, we were still of the training about how profound the hearing loss needed to be in order to recommend a CI. And the candidacy for CI is so much more lenient now. I mean, you could have a moderately severe to severe hearing loss, and if you bomb the word recognition, you're a candidate. And in fact, you're a great candidate, because you've got your brain is still accustomed to using the auditory signal. So unfortunately, audiology as a profession may have been a little bit slow on the uptake as those candidacy rules changed, but it's always nice to have people at Amptify who could be potential candidates, because I think that they're getting updated information.
Right.
Okay, there's one more person. Elliot has a question.
Yes, Ann, you mentioned Med-El Hear Pairs a couple of times. I'm a bilateral Med-El user. Are you suggesting that I might be better off pursuing your program through Med-El Hear Pairs than directly?
Well, I don't want to make the people on the call feel bad, but I think the Med-El discount is 20% and the HLAA discount is 15%. So I've done the research. There's your consumer research for you. If you have Med-El hearing, Med-El cochlear implants, I think you'll get the extra 5%.
Okay, one quick follow-up question. I think you
Sure.
also mentioned a program through Hear Pairs that focuses on music, melody or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
Can you repeat that, please?
sure. It's called Meludia, MELUDIA.
Okay.
And it's not a Med-El specific program. I think it is a private company who just contracted with Med-El to provide a discount for their recipients. So you would go to Meludia's website, not to, well, maybe Med-El has a link to it, but you just look up meludia.com and you can read more about it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Anne, this was fascinating. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your thorough presentation.